Welcome back to Your Voice Down Morrisville. I'm Amy Wuelfing. And in part one of this episode, we looked at how the lack of a full-time borough manager in Morrisville has led to confusion and frustration and a lot of missed opportunities and questions. From the mishandled rollout of the rental inspection program to coordination gaps at the library and the senior center parking lot, which needs fixing, is just kind of some examples. But in this podcast, part two, we're going to ask a tougher question. And that is, if no one's officially, air quotes, officially running the borough full time, then who really is? And so we'll talk a little bit about how power has shifted, why it matters legally and from a liability standpoint, and how it's affecting the residents of Morrisville Borough, their trust in local government. So once again, I'm being joined by council candidates Shawn Ratti from Ward 1 and Deborah Colgan from Ward 3. So let's just jump back into it. So we're talking about the role of the council president versus borough manager. So let's get an understanding of what the council president can and cannot do. So I'm going to throw that one to you, Shawn.
Sure. So a council president is, and I feel like a lot of people misunderstand this a lot as well. It is the same as any other council person, but with a few additional responsibilities. So while the role does carry a little bit of influence, it doesn't have executive authority. And I think that's always worth noting to people because in a lot of my conversations, people seem to think there's a lot more to that title than what it's implied on a government standpoint. What their real additional responsibilities are is that they preside over the council meetings, they develop the agenda, they assign council members to committees, if there are any, and they represent the borough publicly for any council approved decisions.
Right. And the council president cannot act as the borough manager, cannot supervise staff, run day-to-day operations, can't promise or approve any borough money without a vote, a council vote, and cannot make unilateral decisions.
Okay, so it sounds like there are some parameters or guardrails there to protect transparency, maybe avoid some conflicts of interest and ensure that no one person has too much power or authority. So now that we kind of understand the difference between the borough council and the borough manager, let's talk about kind of like this leadership vacuum that we have right now without a full-time borough manager. And from what we see, it looks like in the interim, the borough council president has stepped into that role and is sort of acting as a de facto borough manager, which legally she really cannot do. So that leads to the question, who's making the day-to-day decisions right now?
So we've seen the council president taking on responsibilities that clearly fall underneath the borough manager's job. She signed official borough communications, like the rental inspection letters I spoke about before, and is representing the borough without prior council discussion or even direction. And she's also made decisions about things like the library operations, which should be handled by the proper staff channels, including the borough manager and with council input.
Yeah, and the problem is she's not a professional borough manager. She doesn't have the authority to oversee operations. Yet major initiatives like Southern Riverfront Planning appear to be moving forward without public discussion or even the involvement of the Planning Commission. And that's not just unorthodox. It's not how local government is supposed to work.
So if there's no central coordinator making sure that the proper procedures are followed, that sort of opens the door for a single person to act without oversight. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. And without a full-time manager, there's no one to ensure that those decisions are going through the proper channels. And when power starts to concentrate into one elected official, even one that may or may not have good intentions, it undermines the transparency and the accountability of both that person, the position, and the council itself.
Yeah, and so this isn't just a governance concern, it's a legal one. Pennsylvania law makes it very clear no council member can serve as borough manager. Yet in practice, this line's being crossed here.
Okay, which then leads to another question is, if this is happening, and it sounds like maybe it is, and it's not legal, who's responsible for stepping in to stop this?
See, that's a bit of the hard part. So there are some people who need to be taking the role and responsibility to keep this in check. The state law does prohibit it, but the enforcement really falls to the voters. And that's why it's so important for residents to understand what is actually happening here and why it matters.
Yeah, because when decisions are made behind closed doors without proper input or public process, it's not just inefficient, it's dangerous for a democracy.
Okay, so we've talked about some specific examples and the legal limit that one council member can have. But underneath it all, and you touched on this, Debbie, it's really about trust. So how is this lack of structure affecting public confidence here in Morrisville?
Yeah, trust is foundational. When decisions only happen around election time or when residents are told to just trust that everything is being handled, people naturally get skeptical. Good governance isn't something that just turns on for a few months. It should be consistent, transparent, and grounded in good process.
Exactly. I take the 7-Eleven strip mall in the center of downtown. Residents trusted officials to come up with a good plan. Was that really the best idea? And are we happy with the ultimate outcome?
Yeah, I remember when that was going down. I remember it very well. Yeah, that people had questions, but they weren't really answered. So, that's a good example. But so when people feel shut out of the process, like their voice doesn't matter, um, or they only sort of get told things like after the fact, they're going to lose faith in this system. So public committee meetings have essentially been eliminated or ignored. Is that the case?
Yeah, it's about the lack of options outside of council meetings for people to express concerns and share ideas. That's where that happens is at committee meetings. That's one of the places. And so it's about whether or not the residents feel their voices actually matter. Right now, a lot of people feel sidelined and even afraid to speak up.
We've actually talked to residents, volunteers, and people involved in civic groups in town, and they've told us they are nervous about raising concerns. Unfortunately, this type of environment breeds the concern of repercussions from stuff. They're afraid of, is this going to affect their business? Is this going to affect the work and community work they do in town? Is this even going to go so far as affecting their appointments or positions in town due to having a different opinion on a matter or opposing anything by a council that's in charge? And that's not the type of environment you want to have in a healthy town government. It discourages that participation and it's going to weaken the community connection for everyone involved. And then and I've seen some groups stop a lot of their work because they are tired of trying to deal with the fight.
Well, that's disheartening to hear. So this isn't just about fixing logistics and day-to-day business as usual operations. It's really about rebuilding trust and making sure that people have insight into what's going on and making sure that Morrisville's government works for everyone, not just the few people who are in a position to make things happen behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's right. We need a culture of openness, professionalism, and shared responsibility. And that starts with putting a full-time borough manager in place, someone whose job is to make the system work for all of us. This is the first important stepping stone needed to make sure everyone is involved and respected.
Well, thank you both for joining us, for talking about this and for shedding light on some of these issues. I mean, these were things that I didn't know. And I'm a full-time borough resident. I like to think I'm informed, but there's a lot that goes on that you just don't know about. So that's really what this podcast is about. It's about shedding light on these issues and making sure that people feel included. And so it sounds like we definitely need a full-time professional borough manager, that's not a luxury or a nice to have, that's a has to have. And it's the foundation of any well-run town or borough. And without one, you kind of have a system that's at best is maybe not operating as efficiently as it could. You know, at worst, it's kind of a system that's breaking down and, you know, the residents suffer.
Right, that's exactly right. I mean, if we want Morrisville to thrive with fairness, professionalism, and clear processes, we need to insist on proper structure and leadership. And that starts with hiring a full-time borough manager who can bring order and accountability to our local government.
And it's up to the residents to demand that change by staying informed, asking questions, and voting for representatives that respect the role of the public and work in the public service. Morrisville just deserves better, and you need to have that confidence to speak up, stay informed, and get involved.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Shawn and Debbie, for two borough candidates who will be on the ballot this upcoming election. If this conversation resonates with you, you know, check out the companion blog posts on the MarshallDemocrats.org website. Some of our other blog posts and podcast episodes will probably be of interest to you. So thank you again. This is Your Voice, Our Marsville. And stay tuned and stay informed. Your voice matters.